Hey guys! A lot of people have asked me questions about hunter specializations, and I do so very much enjoy discussing hunter specs with friends, so I'll tell you about some hunter specs. Everything from popular to experimental, and hopefully you'll have a good idea about what specialization you want to try. I'll mention my favorites too, just as a point of interest, and I'll also be demonstrating a variant of each spec in Winterspring. Before I delve into the specifics, I'd just like to state that deciding on which talents to take depends on how they'll be practically applied. So if you're struggling with a decision, look at the talent in question and ask yourself, how can this be practically applied? I'll give you some examples. Take a look at Survivalist versus Improved Wing Clip in the Survival tree. One improves your total health by 10%, and the other gives your wing clip a 20% chance to root the target you hit with it. Improved wing clip may be great for escaping from a melee aggressor, but how much good will it do against a caster? Which do you have more trouble with, rogues and warriors, or spellcasters? What can you survive without? For another example, have a look at the Beast Mastery tree's Endurance Training and Thick Hide talents. Which should you choose? If you're leveling up and using your pet to tank, armor will probably serve them best since they'll be taking hits from enemies. Endurance training will aid against indirect or spell damage like raid boss mechanics or PvP against spellcasters. Endurance training also benefits Spirit Bond. I'll include a link to a Vanilla WoW talent calculator in the description. Go check it out if you need a reference for this video, or if you just want to play around. Now then, let's get going and let's move on to some specs. The first one we're going to look at is a Beast Mastery Marksman specialization, 3120. Beast Mastery is very popular for leveling up, and for good reason. It turns your pet into a monster tank, making it practically impossible for it to die. You can tear through mob after mob very easily. Consider swapping out efficiency for improved concussive shot if you're worried about crowd control. You could also grab improved aspect of the Hawk in Beast Mastery for more ranged damage, or shift some other talents around as you see fit. I'd also recommend getting used to pet control macros so you can micro your pet better. With a spec beefing it up, you'll want at least some control. My qualm with this specialization for leveling is that you're going to lack aim shot unless you spec into Marksman first. So either you have a lot of security and kill things relatively slowly, or you have to wait to beef up your pet. It's also difficult to use on a player versus player server. You won't have scattershot unless you opt out of Bestial Wrath for scattershot, and if you go for aim shot first, you won't get intimidation for quite some time. Beast Mastery doesn't make your pet downright invincible. Your pet can get torn to pieces if you let stuff hit it too long, or if you send it against really tough enemies. However, your pet is considerably stronger, so most foes would be very easy to defeat. You can also support your questing or dungeon parties by using your pet to tank or off-tank if necessary. Moving on, this is a spec that a lot of hunters like to joke or at most speculate about, but no one ever really tries it. While a Beast Mastery Marksman specialization gives you critical ranged damage and a beefed up pet, Survival is better suited to supporting marksmen by rounding out its weakness in melee, letting them escape more easily from melee aggressors and providing a different manner of defense than a beefed up pet. Beast Mastery Survival is guessed about as the ultimate tankiness specialization, so you may want to experiment with talents like Survivalist and Spirit Bond. You could move some Beast Mastery talents around to a more defense-oriented build, or even grab counterattack and spec deflection in Survival over Monster Slaying and improved Wing Clip. If you're really determined to make something like this work, maybe a few points into Marksman just for aim shot will make it a little more feasible for damage dealing. I don't know though. Maybe the key is figuring out which tree you want to get the damage dealing talents in, which tree is going to support the other, and how exactly you're going to approach dealing damage. Whatever you do, your damage is definitely going to be inferior without aim shot. Fast-ranged weapons may even be a good idea. At least you'll stay on the move more easily with Arcane Shot and Serpent Sting as some go-to shots. Taking that into consideration, this spec is probably best played as support. Mana drain people, have your pet assist with stuns, and If you have it, Bestial Wrath. Maybe even get close in PvP to make people focus you. Watch them get confused about how tanky you are, and have a friend mop them up. On the plus side, you do have one thing to look forward to. If you take the appropriate talents, namely Savage Strikes and Clever Traps, the Ravager is compatible with this build. So if you get procs, I said, if you get procs, you can really tear up groups of enemies. So if you have a tank friend or something and they need some AoE damage, go show them what you can do. But in my opinion, there are better specializations for this. If you do try it, good luck making Beast Mastery Survival work well. If you want a Beast Mastery spec that's great for World PvP, you'll find that having both Scattershot and Intimidation gives you formidable crowd control. Throw improved Concussive Shot on top for a little more fun. Of course, you can't take Scattershot or Counterattack if you have Bestial Wrath, just like you can't take Intimidation or Counterattack if you take True Shot Aura, and you can't take Intimidation or Scattershot if you spec into Wyvern Sting. But if you don't mind going without an entry talent, Intimidation and Scattershot can be in the same spec. This variant of the spec is hard PvP oriented, with improved Concussive Shot. Swap to Efficiency if you want more out of your sustained ranged damage. You could also consider a more Beast Mastery oriented spec. Give your pets some more HP, give them Bestial Swiftness for haste in World PvP or open fields in Battlegrounds, or get 2 points in Frenzy and lock down some spellcasters. The benefit of Frenzy is the same no matter what. It's just the proc chance that's reduced. No matter what, your damage and your pet's damage will be just fine in this spec. Just don't try and melee with it, you're not a survival hunter. Thanks to Scattershot and Intimidation, melee is pretty easy to get away from. In addition, unlike root talents like Counterattack, Scattershot and Intimidation work well against every class. Have fun making mages hate their lives. A really popular rating spec is 20-31-0, Beast Mastery Marksman. If you don't like improved Arcane Shot, like I do, I'd recommend improved Hunter's Mark instead. You could also grab improved Revive Pet over 2 points in Endurance training. This spec is great damage, provided you can keep your pet alive. The Horde has an easier time doing this since, I'm told, a Shaman's Chain Heal can bounce to a Hunter's Pet. Personally, I try not to spend time and mana on Mend Pet in the middle of a boss fight, so I just micro my pet around boss mechanics like moving Rapture out of fire on Gehinnis or Magmadar, or having him LOS with me on Firemaw if he's low. Sometimes it works, but it's really easier said than done, and usually Rapture ends up dying. There are alternative pets that may be easier to keep alive. Wind Serpents, for instance, can cast Lightning Breath from a distance, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Let's move on. Marksman Survival is my personal favorite combination of specs, at least for PvP. This spec is more PvE oriented. As before, feel free to move around some talents as you see fit. A little more HP and survival is great for staying in longer on fights like Firemaw, and you can even make it more PvP oriented with some modified talent point allocation. While your pet won't really be beefy, at least you won't miss out on 15 talent points or so if your pet dies during a boss fight. The Monster Slaying and Humanoid Slaying talents from Survival will improve your ranged damage, and Deflection, Deterrence, Savage Strikes, and Clever Traps will boost your damage and survivability in close quarters, like against a Lava Surger in Molten Core, or in the Suppression Room in Blackwing Lair. Savage Strikes and Clever Traps also make this specialization Ravager compatible. In addition, Sure-Footed is extremely helpful if you're not hit-capped, so I'd recommend this spec if you need some more hit chance. It can mean life or death if your Tranquilizing Shot misses on a fight like Chromagus. If you want to max out your ranged damage, 31 points in Marksman, improved aspect of the Hawk from Beast Mastery, and the Slaying talents from Survival will ensure your power is great. This has become a favored spec of mine. I've been over this spec in the Ravager tutorial, so I'm going to make this brief. Even without my pet's damage or tanking, I tear through enemies quickly before they get close. Just a little stutter stepping and it's all good, or I could wing clip and move on. Serpent Sting and Immolation Trap will tick the mob to death, and Rapture could finish him while I get ready to kill the next. This spec's Ravager compatibility also enables you to play with your axe, if you've got one. This here's another favorite spec of mine. This is the spec I leveled with. Not only is it marksman survival, but it makes you an extremely versatile fighter with ranged fighting and melee defending potential, as well as providing you with great burst and crowd control. If you want to play more of a support role, consider swapping out Scattershot for Wyvern Sting, or move some other talents around as you see fit. Here's what I love about this spec. You get all of the critical strike talents from the marksman and survival trees, boosting your critical strike damage and chance. And you also get some sweet crowd control and defensive abilities. Deterrence rocks, counterattack and improved wing clip are great, and of course Scattershot gives you awesome setup and breathing room. So you're basically an untouchable burst machine critting on everyone. I love it, especially with Shadow Meld, they never even see it coming. I spec'd into the marksman talents first, and then started on survival. It worked out well for me. If you're wondering how this sort of spec fares in PvE, I'll show you Wyvern Sting in a moment, but the key to this spec's viability lies in how much agility you have. I believe the golden number is 480 agility, unbuffed? Buffed? Not sure, but you need a ton of agility. Higher agility levels may be easier to reach for Horde Hunters, who can receive support from a Shaman's Grace of Air Totem. But to put this into, simpler terms, a friend of mine and I were experimenting with this spec in raids back on Nostalrius, and according to our calculations, she reached over 40% crit chance with plus 15 agility on Doom's Edge and a Bone Slicing Hatchet, and some Blackwing Lair and Molten Core gear. I never got mine quite that high, but you get the idea. Lots of crit is lots of fun. Here's another Beast Mastery survival spec, and one I would recommend over going Deep Beast Mastery, because this seems like a more preferable support spec, and hunters are quite well suited to a support role. Like the Deep Beast Mastery BM Surv spec, this is only speculated about by hunters, so if you want to try and make anything of this sort work, I'd strongly recommend experimenting with the talents you commit your points to. Wyvern Sting is seriously underappreciated in my opinion. A lot of people that I've talked to think of it as a crappier scatter shot, but it's got a different functionality. Scatter is a setup shot. You combo it with other actions. You use it to punish a bad blink, or keep someone disoriented until you can run up and drop a trap. Or in PvE, you can use it to make a passing mob stay near the tank until they grab it, or extend a broken crowd control. Wyvern Sting, on the other hand, is straight up crowd control, so it can really come in handy when you have to control your pulls. In Stratholme Undead, you can pull a pack of 3 ghouls with a Wyvern Sting on one, trap on another, and your party will be able to leisurely kill off the ghouls one at a time, provided you have the DPS to finish mobs off fast. In PvP, you can instantly take a target out of a fight for 12 whole seconds from up to 41 yards away. Anyway, you get the idea. Support spec, maybe even tanking, but once again, I would recommend Marksman Survival if you want to support your friends. Let's move on to the final spec I've prepared for you today, a generic dungeon farming spec. This is a hybrid spec that incorporates specific talents from each tree, Pathfinding from Beast Mastery, Scattershot from Marksman, and improved Feign Death from Survival. Feign Death may not be an issue in certain places, so just move points around as you see fit. I've used a spec like this for quickly running through Dire Maul North, and I'd use some modifications for the Maraudon farm. Pathfinding is lovely for kiting around bosses and getting to your target faster. You have more time to auto-shot before they catch up to you. I wouldn't recommend it for farming enemies in the world. I'd recommend a PvP spec if you're on a PvP server, or a Beast Mastery spec if you're on a PvE server. Alright guys, I think I've yammered on long enough about this. I hope you all found something you'll enjoy. Something that sounds good to you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you. Good luck, and happy hunting!